My name's Ed Pinero, and I'm the president of Ecometrics. And what I want to talk to you about today is a way that we can start to get at this business case issue. But I want to preface it by saying things kind of don't happen by accident, and there's many different story arcs that kind of led to what we did, what we've done. And it's very interesting that we're talking about it here, in this place, and now in this time. And I want to thank the Texan by Nature folks for inviting me. I've only known the group for a few months, actually. I don't think it was in 2021 when I got to meet the group. And in your career, you look for those opportunities where you like what you're doing a professional thing, whatever your profession is, but it's wonderful people. And you really get an opportunity to make friends and really all work together on the passion. And I want to commend, first of all, Mrs. Bush for creating Texan by Nature, but also Joni and her team for being such wonderful partners, because in a very short time, we have become a great collaborator in terms of our partnership going forward. The other thing that I think is kind of unique about being here is I also had the honor to work for President Bush back in his administration. And I remember being here for the groundbreaking of this facility when it was nothing but mud and wooden panels laying out in the yard. And then I came back for the opening of the facility, and it was beautiful and new. Came back a few years later for an alumni picnic that we had out back, and we really started to see the natural area out back really starting to mature. So being able to follow that history and connecting it with everything that we're doing here is been quite an interesting thing. So as I go through and talk to you about this methodology, I don't want to turn it into a horribly boring, wonky methodology description. So let me tell you about what we do and why we do it in the context of these stories. It's the green button, kind of that way, right? So all right, there we go. Okay, so unlike a lot of the things that we heard earlier today, Ecometrics is a methodology. We calculate. In other words, we figure things out. So we apply it to other projects. So all the kinds of projects that you've heard about today are kind of examples of how we can do the analysis. But fundamentally, and when I say I don't want to get into the boring methodology, is how we do this is complex and very integrated. Love to talk to you about it at your leisure. But in general, what we're doing with Ecometrics is we're really trying to capture the full value of a project in the context of all of the co-benefits, environmental, economic, and social. And we have to do this in a way that is credible and transparent and reproducible. And it's something that really should be applicable to projects that have nature-based solutions or natural resources. We could theoretically apply this to a green building or to a factory, but that's not really its initial intent. And herein comes the first little story arc. Why does this exist? Ecometrics, right now we're a little spin-off organization, but we were born from another nonprofit called Restore the Earth Foundation. And Restore the Earth has a mission to restore 1 million acres of damaged forests in the lower Mississippi River Valley. So that's their mission. And that's called landscape scale restoration, if you've ever heard that term. And in order to be able to do that, you need significant investment from all kinds of sectors, private sector, public sector, the civil society, the philanthropic organizations. No one organization is going to be able to cover this at that scale to be able to do that. So back in 2015, Restore the Earth decided we need to figure out a way to get that support. So they asked companies, Shell, Entergy, and a series of other companies, they asked them, what do you need to know to convince you to invest in natural restoration and these kind of projects? What kind of information do you need to know? At the time, I was working for a multinational infrastructure company, and I was one of the ones they asked, and I said, well, we all love to do this kind of work, but the reality is when you get into the C-suite, you have to make the business case because you're competing against other departments that have very tangible numbers, and they're always going to beat you out. Or you will always be relegated. I shouldn't say relegated because I was this, so it's important to me, but you always are fighting for the few dollars that are in the corporate social responsibility budgets or in the foundation part of the organization. So what you want to do is you want to tap into the operational side of the organization, the revenue, the profitability, the risk mitigation. If you can show business value and a business case for natural-based solutions to that bigger scope of the company, now you're opening up a bigger channel. So that's, with that guidance, Restore the Earth decided to find a tool that would do that. Well, after some global searching, they didn't find one that had everything all integrated, so hence the creation of Ecometrics. And that's why it exists. And in 2018, the decision was, why should we hog it for ourselves? So we spun off Ecometrics so that we could be applied to other projects. So the way we use it, and this is important for the whole argument that we've been talking about all day about getting partners and making the business case, is you have to be able to do two things. You have to be able to forecast. You've got to do scenario planning. You've got to think about what do I want to do, or what could I do, and what are my best choices in terms of getting everything that I want, in terms of value, but also the mission or the vision or the intent of why you started. But you have to be able to also keep track of what you're doing. So that's why when we built this thing, we decided to make it be able to both predict and evaluate. Wait, oops, I went too far? No, I didn't. At its most fundamental, Ecometrics identifies, quantifies, and values benefits. Now that's very straightforward, and we're not rocket science. We weren't the only people to think about this, to do this. The challenge with this is, in many cases, you can identify a benefit, especially social benefits, and those kind of benefits are easier to identify, but that's as far as you can get. Or you can go as far and quantify and say, yes, a benefit of this project is carbon sequestration, and I can tell you how many tons of carbon I'm going to sequester. It gets a little bit harder when you want to value that. Now, for carbon, it's a little bit easier because we have per ton cost. But what about social value? What about community resilience? What about the sense of well-being in the community, or community pride? What about educational value that carries through from youth through adulthood and into career? So what about those values, and how do you monetize those? It gets more and more complicated. And then the other extreme of this is you do it all, but for one or two benefits, and you miss everything else that happens. One of the great things about nature is it is incredibly efficient and incredibly effective. So almost everything you do that's a nature-based solution is going to have multiple benefits that fit in many different categories. So that's why you have the ability to get that big picture, is to be able to do that. So this is a very wordy slide to say two simple things. This ability to value has two primary purposes. There's a business, the financial value. Can I make the business case? What is the return on investment? What am I going to get for the investment? And it doesn't have to be $1 back in my bank account. It could be value created for someone else, but what value am I creating? What is literally the bang for the buck? The other category is storytelling. These projects not only bring value, but they bring value in a very unique, very engaging, cross-sectoral, multi-stakeholder way. And to not be able to tell that story, you miss an opportunity to be able to really get people to rally around what you're trying to do. So this information has helped both sides, the very mechanical financial side, but also the storytelling side. And storytelling could be very broad category. Everything from very formal ESG type reporting to, I don't know, just chatting with people and trying to get them to get excited about your project. So let me give you a quick example of a case of this. And I want to show you this Pointe-aux-Chenes wildlife management area along the Louisiana coast. Now, the reason I picked this project is twofold. One, the information's in the public domain, so I can show it to you. But the other thing is, this is another story arc that comes together. So I mentioned the creation of Ecometrics back in 2015. Go back 10 more years to 2005. One of the things I did when I was with President Bush was I co-chaired the Executive Order on Cooperative Conservation. And the way we kicked that off, in 2005, we had a conference in St. Louis where we brought together 1,100 people, and they were from all walks of life. We had the Secretary of the Department of Defense, we had others in the government, at municipal, state, federal level. We had ranchers from Nebraska, we had fishermen from Alaska, so on and so forth. Tons of people. It was a great event. Two people that were at that conference, who I did not meet for another 10 years, were the Marshalls, who created Restore the Earth Foundation. And they were retired. They were real estate tycoons who retired. And this conference inspired them to want to do something around conservation and environmental nature-based resources. So Monday morning, when the conference opens, is the morning that the levees were breached in New Orleans, when Katrina. So the marshal said, not only do we want to do something around conservation, but we want to restore those forests that were destroyed as part of that hurricane. A lot of people, and understandably so, the human and property impact of that hurricane are legendary. What people don't know, it was one of the single largest forest destruction disasters in the history of the US. So that kicked off this project, which in turn kicked off Ecometrics in order to be able to make the business case for them to be able to do this work. Because we're talking about 1 million acres of commitment, starting off with this 4,000 acre tract that sits southwest of New Orleans, and they had to get people to come in to want to participate. The funny thing about this particular case also is that there were lots of public dollars available as part of the Coastal Restoration Initiative, but you have to have private dollars first in order to get the public sector match. So even though there was a pile of money, so to speak, on the public sector side, couldn't touch it unless you got the buy-in and the support of the private sector. So that was the big driver behind this. So let me show you two very different slides. This is the financial side, very wonky, very typical financial reporting, but it's important to point out that when you do this kind of analysis, you can actually get into very specific return on investment and financial discussions. So now you can hold your own against discussions where they're trying to pull on money to get, to be able to do something else. So this way you can start to talk and negotiate on an even playing field with other kinds of projects that may not have a nature-based solution. The other thing to take away from this is that because nature is so efficient and so effective, the return on investment is astronomical if you do the math and figure out what it is. The other thing I wanted to show you is the storytelling part of this. So this is the same information in a different context. This is about the stakeholders, about the affected communities, about the people who are party to the project. One of the things that's very important to Ecometrics is stakeholder engagement. We don't do this in a black box. We don't do this in a room somewhere. We do have to support it with information collection and research, but the biggest part of this is talking to people. What is important to the community? Why would this project fit here? Why would we want to do this? Why should I let you participate in this? Why should I let you come into our community and do this kind of project? So getting that kind of a stakeholder engagement is important, and then in return, we can then communicate back in very tangible terms, this is what that project is going to do for the community. So let me close. So that was Point of Shen. So that was the beginning of the Ecometrics story and the Restore the Earth Foundation story. Fast forward to this September of 2021. Thanks to Joni and her team, we got connected with the people at headwaters of the canal down in New Braunfels. And I don't know how many of you, if you're local, if you're from Texas, I'm sure you know about it. If you don't, make sure you do. It is one of the most important places east of the west of the Mississippi, but also definitely for Texas. And this is an interesting story because it's very different than, for example, the Point of Shen restoration project. This is a small site in town. It used to be an old water and electrical utility property, a garage that they moved out of. However, they have a water extraction point there, and it turns out that this spring, which feeds the Comal, this is where it starts, is one of the most important springs in Texas, if not throughout most of the country, in terms of its value, its importance. Part of the work that was done there was an archaeological study that uncovered that people were collecting around the spring for using it at least 8,000 years ago in terms of what they were able to find around this community. So this project embarked on this mission to preserve that area and turn it into an opportunity for the community to rally around and to become a real center of education. But as much as that does, that's not their primary end vision. The end vision is people come here, they experience, they learn, and then they take it elsewhere. And they take these ideas home. They take these ideas to their home organization. And that's one of the other values of this kind of work, and that is replication, transferability. Can I take this elsewhere? Because for as much as they're going to do here, they will do a lot, it's going to have a bigger impact if people can learn from it. So what we're going to be doing here, the reason this is an interesting project is, whereas a lot of nature-based projects tend to focus on the environmental benefit, and then they pick up some of the other, this one is actually turned around. The environmental benefit is very important. This is in critical source water areas, so source water protection is important. They're restoring the native grasses, so there's wildlife habitat. There are a couple of endangered species that live in the river there. So this has significant environmental value. But I interviewed like 50 people last week in New Brunswick who are stakeholders to this project. And to a person, they said the two most important benefits that they see out of this project is education, to be able to kids to have experiential learning about nature, even though they live in a relatively urban area. And secondly, community pride. This is an important area to that part of the state, to that city, and it gets lost sometimes in the noise, and they want to really bring this forward. So how do you quantify and value that to be able to make the story? So maybe a year or two from now, we'll tell the Kamal story in terms of what benefit it was able to bring. But that's a pretty fast journey through Ecometrics. Thank you very much. I'd love to chat with anybody at any time about how the sausage is made inside of it, but hopefully the big picture is beneficial. So thank you again for your time.